Hi, and welcome back to another episode of Leadership Lenses, the podcast designed for heads of school, principals, anyone and everyone who's interested in enhancing and improving Jewish education. I am so pleased to have with us today someone who does, in some ways, pretty similar work to what I do. We have similar perspectives, which is what really drew me to her thinking, but she also has a lot of expertise in areas that I don't, and I'm excited to learn. Dr. Sarah Rubinson Levy, principal at Sarah Rubinson Consulting. Sarah, thank you for coming. Welcome. And tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Thanks, Barry. I'm so happy to be here. Live in the great state of Colorado. I am based in Denver, and I've been in the field of Jewish education for over 20 years. I've been a teacher, I've been an administrator, I've been a head of school, and for the last 3 years, my goal in this world now is to find cool people doing cool things and helping them do it. I do a lot of work with empowering excellence and innovation in education, work with schools and mission-driven nonprofits to get through the confusion and the complexity to get to clarity and really do what they do. That looks a lot like I do a lot of strategic project management, thought partnership. There's some areas that I know a lot about, so I'm happy to offer some content expertise. It's really exciting. I get to work with really great people doing great things and help them do it.
Amazing. Amazing. And I want to come back to the confusion and complexity to clarity piece, because I know that's something that I'm sure many heads, principals, and other leaders who are listening are like, yeah, I'm feeling confused. There's a lot of stuff going on. I'd like clarity, please. So we'll come back to how you do that. One thing that I know you've written about and you've done some consulting around topic-wise is the use of AI, not as a pedagogical tools per se, but in how to effectively run organizations, manage. So tell us a little bit about your take on that. What do you believe? What have you seen? What do you do with that?
Well, first of all, I got into that space just really by default. I'm not techie. I'm not an early adapter. I'm like very change adverse. And shortly after ChatGPT came out, I felt like this was something I had to lean into. I felt like for two different reasons. One being, I remember when I was a classroom teacher, I loved being a classroom teacher, but I cried every Sunday because I thought about all the work ahead of me, differentiating lessons, responding to parents, filling out reports, things like that. And I saw AI as this very powerful tool that could help alleviate some of those pieces. Even when I was ahead of school, I used to keep this running list. I used to joke saying, this is why I went to graduate school. This list of things that I had to do on a daily basis that had nothing to do with why I was doing what I was doing. And quite honestly, I wasn't really sure it really benefited the students. Like I said, but still needed to get done. And I saw AI as this very powerful tool to help alleviate some of that. The other piece was that I, as an educator at my core, feel like one of the primary reasons for education is to empower students and equip them for their world. And AI was very much a part of their world. So that's why I leaned into the space in the first place. And it's really to use it as a tool to do what we want to do. When I work with schools and organizations, I start with what's your mission? What's your vision? What's your educational philosophy? How can we use that how can we use AI to help get you there? And really thinking about it from that core foundational level of AI is this really powerful tool, and it helps us to clarify what it is that we do. What are we trying to do? And to get there.
Okay. So I love seeing it as a tool, right? Because anything education, I remember talking about this when smart boards came out or projectors or whatever it is that comes out, iPads in the classroom, Chromebooks, is all tools. None of that stuff on its own solves problems. When I work with schools on the organizational structure and business side, so we've got our, schools are asking me, well, I'm using QuickBooks. Should I go to a different accounting software? I'm using the following fundraising database. I'm using the following CRM. I'm using the following SIS, Student Information System. Should I go to a different one? And the answer for all of those is yeah, do whatever you want, but understand garbage in, garbage out, right? If you don't have an approach and your data's a mess, it's going to be a mess in the new system. If you use whatever tool it is strategically, then you'll be in better shape. And the best thing about a new tool sometimes is it triggers you to think strategically. I'd love to hear. Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say yes to all of that, and Jim Collins in Good to Great, actually, he has a chapter about technology that was obviously written before generative AI was really a big thing, but it's the same idea. He talks about how organizations that have a clear concept of what they're doing can use technology to really propel them. And if you don't, then technology really hinders you. And I think about that with AI a lot. Yes, to what you're saying about the tool, but I think that the other piece about AI that and that you were just touching on is that it really forces us to ask those critical questions, because not only is AI this really powerful tool, but it's also very much shaping the world around us. You know, those of us, you and I and everybody that we work with who work with students, I think that's something we really have to be cognizant of is what skills do they need to live in an AI world? What jobs are going to be around that aren't replaced by AI? How is AI impacting us? So I think we need to think about it from both of those standpoints, both in terms of what this is a tool, how is it going to help us? What way is it going to propel us towards what we're trying to do? But also, in what way is it changing the world around us that we need to adjust and better prepare our students for?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I would love to hear, any like what are the lessons learned in this process when you've gone through this? What have you seen in terms of greater organizational clarity? And what have you seen in terms of the best ways that people are leveraging AI right now?
Well, so it's easy for me as the outside consultant to think about this because I'm not the head of school. You know, I'm not, I remember when I was the head of school, I would have these big dreams. And then, there would be a student come up or a chicken ate a hawk or there was a gas leak. Or so it's easy for you and I to sit back and think about the ideal picture. One of the pieces that comes up for me a lot when I work with schools and organizations with AI is that nothing exists in a vacuum. So when you go in and you want to work with the organization on AI, it raises questions about, is there clarity about our goals? Do we have a clear system to support teachers? Do we have an innovative culture? There's all these different pieces that come into play that you can't just come in. I mean, you could, but I don't find it effective to come in and do a workshop on the 10 tools you need to be doing using AI for right now. How could you be using AI? I think it all exists in this bigger ecosystem. And like I said, it forces these organizations to take a step back and think about, how true am I being to my educational philosophy? How am I supporting teachers? What and how should we be teaching? What is the role of assessment? Why do we assess? And so it is bringing up these really big questions. And what I find to be the more like the successful case studies with whom I've worked have been those that are interested in grappling with those questions and aren't interested in just taking AI and inserting it to do exactly what they've been doing, but with AI. And yes, obviously, maybe not obviously, that first option is a lot more work. It takes a lot more work to examine the culture and the ecosystem and the systems and structures you have in place. And it allows you to then use AI much more effectively, much more mission aligned, much more values aligned. And it doesn't feel like you're just inserting it into something. And so I think that what I'm seeing, at least with AI, is it's not new. To those of us who work a lot with organizational cultures and change leadership, it's not new. It all exists. It's all one big ecosystem. One thing impacts another. And it does raise these questions that we all have to face.
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, I definitely hear that. Um, I'm curious what you would say to schools who are right now not engaging with AI, who are saying, look, I'm good. We're going to do things the way we do them. Teachers might have to deal with it in the classroom. I'm not talking about the academic integrity parts of it or those sides, but from an organizational level, we're going to just not deal with AI right now. What do you say to those folks?
Well, and there are a lot that are doing that, whether it's from like a philosophical level of I've worked with schools that are like, we're very low tech, this isn't our thing, or from a this just isn't a priority level. I get that. When I work with schools, I think about three different pieces to the AI in schools puzzle. And one of them is, well, three different tracks. There's the behind the scenes, the foundational aspects, but then there's three different tracks that I really think about. One of them is this kind of behind the scenes piece of, how can you empower your teachers to use AI to make their lives easier, to differentiate lessons, to flesh out student reports, to do all these pieces of not administrative work, because lesson planning is an administrative work, but the pieces that help them be better in the classroom, but aren't actually in front of students. So that's one piece. The next piece would be bringing AI into the classroom so that there's places that you could be doing things in the classroom that you can't without it. And then the third piece is AI literacy for students. And when I say AI literacy for students, I don't yes, I think that it's important for students to know how to craft a prompt effectively and how to vet the information and check for bias and misinformation. But even starting with our littlest kids, our ECE kids, our kindergartners, what skills are we cultivating in them? Critical thinking, curiosity, pieces, things like that, that lead them to be successful in an AI world. So I think about those three different pieces. And even if schools aren't ready to tackle all three of them or even two of them, that first piece of teaching their teachers and empowering their teachers to use it to make their lives easier is a kind of a low hanging fruit because you don't have to involve parents and students and things like that. And B, it can allow your teachers to be much more effective, to save them time and to lead to teacher retention. And so I think that it's a really big missed opportunity to not at least dabble in that space, to empower your teachers, like maybe not force your teachers. There are some schools that are mandating AI implementation for their teachers, but the early adopters and empowering them to see how quickly it can streamline some of their pieces so that the teachers can then do what you hired your teachers to do and why they went into the profession. I've seen it lead, like I said, to teacher retention, to higher job satisfaction, to, happier, more effective teachers. And that's just a really great place to start.
Absolutely. Happier and more effective teachers are wonderful.
Yes.
So I definitely hear that. And I think you need that vision as a school. And I love the way you clarified here are the tracks that you might think about and the way you can think about. Because I think with AI, like in many things, it's big. And so with big things, what our tendency to do is just shut down. Like too much, don't know where to start, not thinking about this. And particularly if I'm a head of school or a principal and I've already got 1,001 things to think about, I'm not thinking about it, or I just use it in a very superficial way. Like I'm going to use some chat GPT or similar to help edit some of my writing or help like do a lot of little things, which are nice. I enjoy those. I think they're great as long as it doesn't take over too much and you don't lose some of your own personal pieces. But those aren't transformative. And what you're talking about is let's think deeply about how we work as a school and we may access some transformative power of AI or we may access some transformative power of us because we're thinking more clearly about what it is that we're trying to accomplish here. So I know you do a lot of the project management stuff, which you mentioned, right? So I'm curious how this extends. It doesn't have to be AI in particular, but it strikes me that you have a lot of experience trying to make stuff work. Projects go, change go, things get managed. And that's a lot of what we're doing as school leaders, but also dealing with the student discipline and other problems that pop up in the midst of everything else like you noted. What are some of the best techniques and approaches that you yourself use to manage things effectively, smoothly and clearly?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'm not sure that this answer directly answers your question, but it's something that I was thinking about as you spoke, which is to circle back to this AI piece and how I personally use it to benefit my clients, which is a way that others could use it. So in project management, there's it and being a head of school and running an organization. There's a million tasks on your plate. There's like the deliverables, I have to write this report. I have to put together this slideshow. I have to do the strategic plan. And then there's what you do with it. And I've been really
Okay.
cognizant in my work with clients and projects and my utilizing AI in terms of what is my unique value add here? And what could AI do maybe better than me, maybe the same as me, and what can't AI do? And AI, quite honestly, can make a lot of those deliverables. Maybe the same as me, maybe a little bit better, maybe slightly lower. I work with projects a lot where a lot of the projects that we mentioned, I do a lot of work with like complexity and confusion to clarity. And a lot of that
Mhm.
involves documentation and processes and protocols and structures. And AI can draft all of those for me. It can create job descriptions, it can create an organizational structure, it can create processes. But what AI can't yet do is work with the school on the implementation. What does this look like? What happens when something looks a little bit different? Dealing with that really big human element. And I'm one person, I work by myself, and I am always thinking about what is the biggest impact I can give towards this project and how can I use that? And so with any sort of project management, so like I said, a head of school is a project manager and you have finite hours and finite bandwidth and all of your teachers and your administrative staff finite, really thinking about what am I trying to accomplish? How can I get the biggest impact? And what tools are at my disposal? My number one thing in any working environment is clear and transparent communication. And like I said, a lot of that comes back to proper documentation and putting it all in writing and getting a lot of clarity. And so, one of the things I'm really good at, for example, is facilitating the conversations with stakeholders so that we can all voice our thoughts on a different piece, but AI can really put it on paper and then I can bring it back and facilitate that conversation. And so really thinking about the human elements versus the AI elements, and as has been a theme of this conversation, what tools are at our disposal in order to leverage the impact to get to what we're actually trying to accomplish?
Yeah, and what I love from what you said, which I think may come more naturally in a consultant hat, but it's a great thing for heads and principals to think about is what do I uniquely bring to this? What value can I bring? So I remember being a head as well, and I was doing this task. Why? Because no one else was going to do it. So it might have been, I remember one morning where I was assembling with my power drill that I brought from home, the recycling box that was the culmination of the kindergarten art project. And then I was reviewing next year's budget. And, in between, maybe I was teaching a class or two. So, like a wide variety of things because, well, I guess I'm going to do them because no one else is going to do it. And that's amazing. It was one of the things I loved and still love the variety in what I do in any given day. But it sometimes means you don't think about how should I, me in particular, engage with this to bring value. So, as a head of school, you're managing a lot of projects, but in each one, there might be a different role that you think about playing. In some of
Mhm.
them, you may be the content expert. In some of them, you may be the project manager par excellence, where you got the deadlines and you're moving things along. And in some of them, you may be a facilitator where you're saying, my job is to make sure all the principals I'm supervising or anyone else in this work is having the right conversations and I'm guiding those. So even thinking about that and bringing that perspective to your day-to-day work as a school leader, I think could be very, very powerful.
I will say, like, not to keep coming back to AI, except fine, because that's one of the pieces. My working with AI has actually helped refine my thinking on this. Because when I work with AI, I'll often give it a role. And then at the end of a prompt, I'll ask it to ask me clarifying questions. And it'll ask me things like, what tone are you trying to convey? Who is your target audience? What is your ultimate goal with this? And so because it always, it reminds me to be very intentional about those pieces because absolutely, Barry, I was like chuckling when you were talking about assembling the recycling bin. One of my what I remember, like I mentioned it, like I had to plan a chicken funeral because one of our hawks ate, like a hawk ate one of our chickens, and it like there's all these things. And in that moment, I wasn't being, Dr. Sarah Rubinson Levy, who has a doctorate. I was being the one staff person who wasn't actively engaged with students at that time and could like pick up the pieces. And so I think that being very intentional about all of these, like, what am I trying to accomplish? Who am I being? What tone am I bringing? Because like you said, there's so many different stakeholders, there's so many different projects, we all bring such a big piece of ourselves, and sometimes you are the facilitator, sometimes you're the leader, sometimes you're the listener, and just the reminder to be intentional about all those different pieces, I think is very important.
Absolutely. And I really hope when you said you were picking up the pieces, that was a metaphor and not anything literal with the chicken and the hawk. But we'll put that aside for a moment. You exposed there a little bit how good you are at writing prompts, right? You just kind of threw it in of the way you put a but, like, repackage that for us. What do you do? What do you, Sarah Rubinson Levy, do when you are creating prompts for your own AI work that really gets you those best results?
Yeah, I mean, you said it a little bit earlier, like garbage in, garbage out. So, like, thinking a lot about what am I feeding the AI platform? And I use what I think of as a little bit of like a sandwich method. Like, I start with me. I often will take notes from a meeting or a draft of a document or some initial thoughts on what I'm trying to accomplish. I'll even take what I consider to be a final product, something like that. And I will turn it over to AI and I will be very specific about what I'm looking for. I'll say, so for example, I hate proofreading my own writing. I hate it. I've never been good at it. I just don't want to do it. And so sometimes I'll just say, proofread this. Or sometimes I'll ask it to be a specific role because, like I said, I work by myself. And even, a head of school can be a very lonely role because you don't have another head of school. You're supervising people or reporting to people or whatnot. And especially for some of our small schools, the head of school is playing a variety of roles. You might also be the development director, the admissions person, the Judaics lead. So you mentioned that you have a whole team of AI people helping you. I also have a whole team. So sometimes it'll be my marketing expert, sometimes it'll be my thought partner, sometimes it'll be a potential client or potential family or something like that. I will ask it to take on a specific perspective. I'll be very specific about what I'm asking for. Do I just want light editing? Do I want you to rephrase this? Do I want you to take my blog article and make it a social media post? Do I want you to take this draft of a report and suggest what a PowerPoint might look like? And then the piece that I like doing now is I will ask it, what am I missing? Or what questions it has for me, because I do think that it then pushes my thinking to get it to the next level. Because while I consider myself to be very thoughtful and intentional, sometimes I don't remind myself. And so AI will remind me, like I said, it'll ask me what tone I'm aiming for, what my audience is. Do I want it to come off as more academic, more formal, more this, more that? And I'll have to think for myself, oh, right, I'm writing to this person. This makes sense. Then it'll give it back to me and I push back and I'll say, you got it wrong, or please revise, or, oh, I forgot I actually wanted this or whatnot. And then I always do a final run through because ultimately anything that I do, it comes off as me. And sometimes it's changing the M dash to a semicolon. And sometimes I had to be very specific with it. It used to give me a lot of emojis. I personally never use emojis. Like I told my kids that that's how they know that like somebody kidnapped me, is if they get text messages with emojis. So, I'll go through to make sure it sounds like me. And it's very trial and error. And I read a lot about people's ideas about what our best prompting is. But like I said, I'm not afraid to engage with it. I'm not afraid. I write very long prompts because I like to feed it.
Right.
So
So a lot of what you're saying, it strikes me back to my first years teaching where I would give an assignment to, let's say, my 10th graders, and they would write the assignment. I'd get it back and I'd be like, oh, that's not what I meant.
yes,
That's, and so it took me as a teacher some time to understand if I want students to do a meaningful assignment, I have to give them enough parameters.
yes,
Here's what you're trying to accomplish. Here's the voice. Here's how it's going to be assessed. Here's what a vision of a success looks like. And you actually have to do the same thing when you want to use AI effectively. So it's an interesting tool because it saves you if you use it well, it saves you an unbelievable amount of time, but you still can't be lazy when you're using it. If you're lazy when using it, it's going to be just, the same garbage in, garbage out. And all of that, I think, kind of really comes back to the central theme we've been running through in everything we've talked about here, which is you need to be intentional and thoughtful about what you're trying to accomplish. So whether that's writing a prompt for AI or an assignment for students, or this is actually my personal favorite little blip from this conversation is as a leader, as a head, thinking about what role am I playing in any given project, meeting. I'm not there because I'm the head of school. I happen to have the title head of school, but what am I bringing to this meeting, project, assignment, whatever else it is? That to me is game changing. I'm definitely going to use that, but it's really all of a cloth. It's all about thinking intentionally and taking that approach to tools, approaches, everything that we're dealing with.
Absolutely.
So, Sarah, thank you for taking the time to be with us. Really, it's been a pleasure learning from you, and I'm sure people listening are saying to themselves, "Wow, I'd love to learn more, whether it's AI, project management, or anything else." Can you tell listeners, if you're okay with them contacting you, what's the best way to reach you?
Yes, feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to answer questions, be a thought partner, talk anything. You can find me on LinkedIn, Sarah Rubinson Levy. I have a website, sarahrubinsonCC.com, or my email address is sarah@sarahrubinsonCC.com. And I would be happy to hear from anyone.
Amazing. Thank you. And we will put those all in the show notes. So if you didn't catch them now, just click on the show notes. You can get Sarah's email, LinkedIn, website. It'll all be there for you. What I really want to say to those of you listening is if you haven't thought deeply about AI and how it can help you and how it can help your school, put that on your to-do list. Try that out. And if you have, then try this other nugget on for size of coming into any given day, meeting, or project, and not just coming in as your job title or your name, but coming in and saying, what is the way that I can best bring value to this particular work? Try that hat on, try it out, and please let me know how it goes. And as always, you can reach me, Barry Kislowitz, on LinkedIn, Leadership Lenses on Substack, or at our website, kislowitzconsulting.com.